A new face in the Utah backfield may have emerged. What is the state of the offensive line? And we just heard from Andy Ludwig and Morgan Scally. We're breaking down their comments on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments, as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers can join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by Dante Guardi of UteZone. And Dante, it's been so great having spring ball back because there's always new storylines, new things that happen that surprise us. Whatever we thought, like, oh, this guy would start here, this guy would start there, it's never played out. Case in point, the running backs. And I'm not saying that Mike Mitchell is going to start, but it was clear that he was one of the standouts from day one. Several people have mentioned that he's just a guy who's going to be in this waste in the backfield, right? Like Andy Ludwig even mentioned it, just talk about how much talent there is in the room, and they know what McIver and Jalen Glover are, but Mike Mitchell was someone that everyone's been raving about him. And I think it makes sense, right? He's a guy when you sign an Anthony Woods coming in, like you're going to forget about when you have those three running backs, including Glover and Bernard in that, you kind of get lost in the shuffle, a guy like Mitchell. But we are talking about a guy who's a former four-star recruit. He was rated the number 16th running back in his class, and he was just a monster back at the high school he was at in Orange Park, Florida. So this is where I get really excited about his potential and abilities. And honestly, I did think coming in, like, oh yeah, it's for sure just going to be the three guys who are going to be the main backs for Utah this year. With everything we're hearing about Mitchell, I definitely think he has a shot to see major time come the season.
I agree. And you look back to the past couple of years where Utah's kind of gone with more of a committee approach, whereas in the prior years, you saw Zach Moss getting the entire share of the carries and Devontae Booker and Joe Williams, guys like that, whereas Utah's kind of shifted from that to more of a committee approach. And when you take into account the guys that are already in the room with Mekhi Bernard, a fantastic receiving back, a guy who can just make those clutch plays as he has over the entire course of his Utah career, on top of getting a big transfer like Anthony Woods, who had put up some pretty solid numbers for Idaho. So, I mean, having a guy emerge like Mike Mitchell is just so massive for the overall state of the Utah offense. And I think it's really interesting to see Coach Whittingham go out of his way to highlight some of these younger guys. I mean, I know it's only 2 days into spring camp, but to see him highlight these younger guys is absolutely massive. You saw what he said about the offensive line with Lomu and Fano looking good as well. So, I mean, when you mix that with an already good running back core, you have another guy emerging, and you have Coach Witt saying good things about the offensive line too. I mean, how can you not be excited, especially not after hearing anything about Utah football for the last 2-3 months? Now all of a sudden it's back, and I mean, it feels like it's September again, and even though it's only March 13th and it snowed today here in Salt Lake City, but yeah. I mean, you can't complain about the juices flowing around Utah football. And I can't stress it enough how big it is for Coach Witt to be emphasizing the play of these younger guys this early on in their careers, because he's never been a coach to give a player too much confidence. He'll give credit where credit is due, but you never see him going over the top. And to see him kind of do that this early on in the process of this season and in their careers, it's awesome to see.
It's really exciting. And I'm excited about the opportunity Mitchell has. He's, of course, not the only back. You mentioned some of the other guys, even just talking about DeJon Stanley, like John Randall, all these guys. How are they going to factor in? Also mentioned the offensive line. We're going to dive deeper into that in our second segment, but continuing with just some of the interesting things that I thought that Andy Ludwig commented on. Obviously, the big thing is going to be the quarterbacks, and Isaac Wilson is one of the guys on Utah Athletics website. You guys can access the quotes that I'm going to be discussing here. This was Coach Ludwig talking about Isaac Wilson. He's here to compete and earn a position, whether that's first team, which I don't even know why he said that, second team or third team. He's a competitive young man. We're going to put him in position to succeed. And look, yes, he's just getting acclimated to college football, Isaac Wilson, but how can you not be fired up about the tools and traits and what he did at the high school level and being the 4-star he is? I'm personally enamored with the off platform and just the ability to do things when plays break down a little bit, right? Like when you're that athletic, I think that's what gets me really excited just as a fan of a Patrick Mahomes, of a Caleb Williams. I am not in no means comparing Wilson to those guys, but I'm just more so saying I love when a quarterback can do things off schedule. And I think that Wilson has the potential to do that at a high level. Hence why I'm very excited that he's an early enrollee, already getting some nice action, and has an opportunity to compete with Brandon Rose for the backup quarterback spot.
And regardless of what spot he ends up getting, he's still going to be able to learn behind Cam Rising for a year, which is so massive.
Yep.
I mean, you saw what happened with the Green Bay Packers this past season, where Jordan Love absolutely lit it up in the playoffs, where people were questioning him. But having that experience sitting behind Aaron Rodgers and seeing the way that he competed and just carried himself at the highest level of football, I think really helped him out. And I think you're going to see something similar with Isaac Wilson. But you also, when the time does come for him to step on the field, you have to allow him to make mistakes, especially given how much his game is derived off of improvisation. You think back to when Tyler Huntley got his first career start in 2017 when he was a sophomore. I mean, the Utah allowed him to make mistakes, and I think that's really what allowed him to blossom into the player that he ended up becoming. And you take into account the raw traits of an Isaac Wilson, probably a little bit better than what Tyler Huntley brought to the table. So, I mean, the upside is just so immense for Isaac Wilson. It's going to be super special to watch him grow as a player throughout the course of his career. Obviously, you don't know if it's going to be 3 years, 4 years, whatever it might be. But having a year to sit behind an experienced veteran like Cam Rising, a guy who's already earned the respect of pretty much everyone in the room at Utah, all the fans, everyone in Salt Lake City, pretty much. So, I mean, having that experience behind him is going to be massive. And when he steps on the field, it's just going to be electric. You alluded to it, what he did in high school, all the traits, the comparisons to guys like Mahomes, Williams. I mean, obviously, time will tell whether or not that comes to fruition. But I mean, the fact that we're even talking about, they're even comparing him to players like that, just shows so much about the tools that he brings to the table.
Yeah, just the potential ceiling of what it can be in that range. And Isaac Wilson was obviously a higher 4-star like rating than Cam Rising was coming in. So who's to say he couldn't eventually be better? I'm not saying like, oh, it's going to happen, but if you're telling me like, I think the sentence is absolutely true. Wilson has a chance to be better than Cam Rising. That's not an insane statement to say at all, which I think is why we are so excited about his potential. But he's not the quarterback room isn't the only group I'm really excited about. We already talked about the running backs. Dante, this is as excited about a Utah receiver room as I've been in a while. And I feel like we've all said this in one way or another the past years, but this one feels different. You got a guy in Dorian Singer who's proven he can get 1,000 yards at the collegiate level. You get other young guys coming in like a Washington, but especially like a Tayshaun Lyons. I mean, when you look at the 4 and 4-star, who I'm sorry he didn't play at Washington in this last year when he was behind literally just a bunch of NFL receivers and what they can do. I've always liked what Money Parks can provide as kind of that deep threat, potential take the top off the defense. Brandon, we saw his highlight come with Bryson Barnes in the very first play of the season, wasn't able to maximize his abilities there too. You get Munir McClain in the mix as well, a veteran guy. And that's why even mentioning some of the other wide receivers who have been in this program for a little bit, waiting in the wings for this opportunity. This feels like a wide receiver room with some real juice in it. And I don't know if we could have said that in the past.
100%. I mean, you got depth and versatility, and I think those are the two biggest keys to having a well-rounded and just a simply great wide receiver corps in college football. And you also have an alpha dog receiver in Dorian Singer, and having that is just absolutely massive because defenses will start keying in on him as soon as he starts having a couple 100-yard games early on in the season. And that's going to open up so many more opportunities for the other guys, the newcomers, the guys that have come back. I mean, we saw Munir McClain show off his athleticism a few times last season. He can make a play. Money Parks obviously has blazing speed. I mean, the opportunities are just going to be endless for this receiving corps. And when you take into account everything surrounding them in regard to the overall state of the offense and how highly we think of the entire roster, especially the offense, and the coaches have spoken highly of them as well. So, I mean, with a well-rounded receiving room, it's just going to open up so many more opportunities in the run game, in the quarterback run game, play action pass. I mean, there's so many different opportunities that are opened up by having a well-rounded stable of receivers. And as I mentioned before, having that true alpha, having that X receiver in Dorian Singer is going to be so massive for this Utah team. I'm not saying he's going to get 1,000 yards, but I mean, he's going to put on a show he's going to put on a show, simply put, I believe. And like I said, when he starts having a couple of good games, defenses are simply just going to be keying on him, and that's going to open up a lot more opportunities for the rest of the offense. So it's going to be really exciting to watch. And I agree with you in regard to this being the most excited I've been about a Utah receiving corps in quite some time.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see what they can do. But, whether it's the running backs, the quarterbacks, or the receivers, their success in large part hinges on the performance of the offensive line. And we got an early indication on what the offensive line could potentially look like. Want to talk about that group in one moment. But first, want to talk to you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But to get this now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. You can get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for the same legal info, you guys can claim as a Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Also, making sure you guys know about investing that involves risk, including losses. Limitations apply to RRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% match on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial is a registered broker-dealer. I also want to talk to you all about another sponsor of our episode of Locked On Utes today, our friends at Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether you're in the opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournaments all about to get underway, you're going to want to have Fire TV. Fire TV recently created a Fire TV channel that delivers a constant supply of the latest videos for your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more. You can keep up to date on all the latest in the worlds of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, and a lot more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos, as well as so much more. So you can check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this one. And to learn more, you guys can go to www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Dante, the Utah offensive line was something that had some ups and downs last year. Still more positive than negative, but wasn't as strong as it had been in years past. Definitely felt like the team felt the loss of Braden Daniels. And you lose a guy like Caleb Lomu, or excuse me, not Caleb Lomu. You lose a guy like Keaton Bills, and you also lose a guy like Satao Laumea. Those are key losses. But you have some new guys coming in that I'm pretty excited about. Because Spencer Fano started at left tackle, we all kind of forgot that he wasn't the only four-star offensive lineman that Utah was able to add in the class of 2023. Caleb Lomu was also there. And obviously he's been doing good things behind the scenes because he's starting spring ball as the starting left tackle. That's something that, honestly, I'm really fired up about. I'm not, maybe part of me could be like, I don't know, he doesn't have the experience there. But look, neither did Fano last year, and he was a freshman. And while I thought he was good, he also played a lot of right tackle in high school. So I do like the decision to maybe move him back over that side. And Lomu, being the four-star that he is, his potential's high with offensive linemen. It always takes a little bit of time for them to round into form and shape, get up to that strength. Hence why I think Fano will be much better year two than he was even in year one. But get the current state of the Utah offensive line, beating Laumea, Tongai, Coley at center, Mokafisi, and Fano. If that is the group come this fall, I really like the potential of it.
Yeah, I mean, losing a guy like Keaton Bills, who was just the overall glue of the offensive line last year, on top of Satao Laumea, who was just a fantastic run creator throughout his entire time at Utah and really blossomed into a solid pass blocker as well. I mean, those losses are significant, very significant. But as you alluded to, looking back at Utah's prior recruiting classes, there was never really too much worry, especially given Jim Harding being back as well. I mean, he's been here for years now, and he always seems to put together a pretty solid offensive line unit. And you take into account as well that Spencer Fano was the first tackle to start in the Pac-12 as a true freshman since Penny Sewell. I mean, at that point, it doesn't even really matter like how good he does. It's more so just the fact that he's earned that spot and he's just getting experience, especially when you take into account how good the Pac-12 was last year. I mean, he faced Braylon Trice, that Washington defensive line that was just nasty. The UCLA defensive line as well with Latu. I mean, that was another nasty defensive line. Those were probably two of the top three defensive lines in the nation last year, definitely top 10. So, I mean, he went up against some great competition, has that year of experience, and now is going to be back. And as you said earlier, he's back at his strong spot. That is right tackle. So seeing how he's going to do there is going to be extremely interesting. And then Lomu as well. I mean, as I said earlier, you don't really see Kyle Whittingham going above and beyond to give these young guys credit. He kind of likes them to earn their stripes, if you will. And to see Lomu be talked about this well, or this just talked about with this much energy and this much positivity this early on in spring ball. We're not even in fall camp yet, and he's already being hyped up by the coaching staff. Just fantastic to see. And when you take when you have a solid left tackle and a solid right tackle, it just makes everything so much easier for the passing game. So I mean, if Utah's able to lock it down at both those spots, I think the rest will run its course, and the offensive line is going to be yet again a strong point on this team.
Yeah, it is going to be a strong point, I feel like, and I'm excited to see how it does all eventually come together. Spent a lot of time on the offense. Want to give the defense their shine as well. Got to hear from Morgan Scalley, and he was asked specifically about a guy in Keenan Johnson, the Georgia Tech transfer coming over, and said that he's a guy that has the experience, that experienced a lot of college football. He has a ton of reps under his belt and has done some really good things. And he said it's just kind of learning the scheme, the communication, but, you know, he's got the technique. Obviously, he knows what it takes to succeed at this level. That's something else Scalley just kind of elaborated on, and I'm excited about Johnson. This is a Utah team that lost a lot of experience in JT Broughton going to TCU, and then you get a Miles Battle who moves on now after completing his college eligibility. I think Johnson could be a big get. Pairing him opposite Zamiah Vaughn, I think, is something that could be really important for this team's future success. And I like a guy that have reps on the outside, to know what it takes going against college receivers, all things like that. As much as I get excited about the young guys, and I do think Smith Snowden has a really good shot to be one of the starting corners, and I'm fired up about him. But I would rather it be like one new guy starting. I like, in terms of like his college playing experience. Yes, Johnson's new from a transfer standpoint. He has a lot of collegiate reps. Smith Snowden has a lot of practice reps, not a ton of in-game reps. So if you give me a cornerback starting, like the main three corners you're going to see on this field for this Utah's team is like a Smith Snowden, if he's the nickel guy mostly, and then you get Vaughn and Johnson out there too, I love it. I think it could be a really sensational group.
Yeah, I mean, just having Zamiah Vaughn still in the building is so massive for this program. Yep. I mean, the coaches have touched on how great his development has gone throughout the past 3 years. I'd say, I mean, he came on as a walk-on quarterback and transitioned to corner and just has blossomed into a fantastic player. When he was opposite Clark, I'm pretty sure he had more pass breakups actually than Clark did that season. And then last season really came into his own as the cornerback one. So, I mean, we're talking about a real lockdown corner here, a guy who's got a lot of experience and immense talent as well. And when you add experienced transfers like that next to a player like that, I mean, it's hard for things to fail when everyone's just simply working towards a common goal. And when you have guys that have been around the block and know what it takes to win at the college level and know what it takes to succeed at the college level, it just makes that so much easier. I mean, Miles Battle wasn't a fantastic player by any means. He was good, but having that experience to the point where he can just walk in and get reps day one, it's so massive for the coaching staff. It allows them to sort things out easier. And then when you take into account the plethora of transfers that Utah's gotten this season at the defensive back positions, it's hard to question their depth as well. So I mean, the secondary is never really a group that I'm too concerned about for Utah. They're always a group that I'm very high on. If anything, when you got Morgan Scalley in the building and Sharif Shaw, who guys in the NFL have looked back on and called him one of the hardest coaches they've ever had. So, I mean, when you have coaches like that who are experienced and know what it takes to win at this level, and you have players that are willing to buy into the system as well, it's hard for it to fail. And this year, I think, is going to be no exception, especially when you have an offense that's also kind of leading by example, that's going to be explosive and gives the defense more motivation to go out there and get stops, simply put. So I'm really looking forward to see how this Utah secondary develops and the way that the depth chart kind of shakes out and who's getting reps where.
To your point about just having faith in the different coaches and the positions and the history, honestly, over the past few seasons, wide receiver is the only major position I look at, and I'm like, I don't feel like, each year it's like, can they be better? Can they improve, live up to the billing? Outside of that, Utah every season has a pretty good defense top to bottom. I mean, last year an elite rushing defense, and yes, like they'll have down performances. I remember week 1 against Florida, we all do coming off the first Pac-12 championship. Not great in Gainesville, but then the next year saw how good they were, right? And they even rounded into form that season and won back-to-back Pac-12 championships, right? The secondary is always elite. The front seven is always elite. And yes, Utah last year had their problems at quarterback, But whenever Utah's main plan at quarterback has been, it's usually worked out, right? Whether it's Tyler Huntley or Cam Rising, those guys have balled out. The tight end's always exceptional, and there's always productive running backs for this team. And the offensive line, even in years like last year, where I didn't think it was as good as it'd been maybe the past couple, still pretty good overall. By no means a disaster or anything, just a little disappointing performances, a little underwhelming in certain spots, but overall still a really good unit. And I think that's what has me so fired up about Utah football each season. And I think, this is just a bigger topic. I feel like sometimes I talk about this team, and we see other people talk about this team, and they're like, all this Utah talk, like you guys are crazy, yada this, yada that. It's like Utah has a proven track record of history of excelling. I know last year wasn't great on paper, but they won 8 games with a backup quarterback in there. And yeah, the bowl game wasn't pretty, but a lot of guys opted out. One of those being Devon Bailey, the number 1 wide receiver, who was essentially the passing game offense. Like, I think sometimes people think like, why do you talk about Utah this way and that way? But it's like, it's a proven track record. They continue to win. It doesn't matter who's out there, Dante. This Utah football program continues to find ways to win games. And even in the past 3 years, 2 of the last 3 win conference championships.
100%. I mean, I think the game that encapsulates everything you just said was the USC game last season, when everyone was kind of down in the dumps about Utah and people weren't really sure with all the injuries and whatnot. And they faced adversity in that game. I mean, they had to put together a game-winning drive against USC on the road, a team that was motivated to beat them, who Utah had beaten badly in Vegas not too long before that, and beaten in Rice-Eccles even sooner than that before that. So, I mean, you're talking about a game that encapsulates everything you just said. That's the one. But I just wanted to go back to the coaching staff kind of. I mean, you hit the nail right in the head. I don't really have a whole lot to add, but I just want to point out how absurd it is that Utah has been able to retain Colton Swan, Sharif Shah, and Morgan Scalley throughout all these years. I mean, I know Colton Swan's newer than those other 2, but I mean, he is such an elite linebackers coach. Like the jump that Utah saw in their linebacker recruiting ever since he stepped in the building is so noticeable. And you take into account like a case like Devin Lloyd, where he was a 2-star safety coming out of high school. There was a lot. I mean, you're looking at a player like that, you're not even sure if he's going to step on the field throughout his Utah career. You're probably going to end up in the transfer portal more often than not at this point. And Colton Swan, I mean, turned him into an absolute dog, simply put. So you take a look at that, as well as the players that he's brought in. I mean, Colton Swan's one of the best linebacker coaches in the nation. And the fact that Utah's been able to retain all these elite assistants is such a good look for the program. It's a good look for recruiting, and it just contributes to just a sound football program. And that's what Utah's been. So I don't see this transition to the Big 12 posing much of a threat. I expect Utah to do what Utah's done over the past few years, and that's develop their players to a great level and win football games. So that's all I got really on that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited to see it all play out too. And one thing I'm also really excited is all the opportunities some of these pro Utes are getting with new NFL teams and securing a bag for themselves. Want to talk about a few of those guys who just got paid the big bucks, that being millions of dollars at the highest level of football you can achieve, in one moment. But first, I want to talk to all of you about our friends at Nissan. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, and that team pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. And let's stay in the state of Utah, talking about the Utah State Aggies, who are obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. This team absolutely surprised us all with a powerful performance against New Mexico State, giving them their first outright Mountain West title in program history. They say win life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Aggies have done here. Absolutely shouting out. I love that they're giving Utah State their credit. What Danny Sprinkle, coming from Montana State, shout out Big Sky, has been able to do with the Aggies has been tremendous to want. Great awesome for the season they're having too. Excited to see what the Aggies are going to do in the NCAA tournament. But make sure you guys take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Also want to talk to you all about another one of our sponsors here at Locked On Utes, our friends at UCCU. Here's some exciting news. UCCU just elevated their checking accounts by enhancing them with more benefits, more savings, and more online protections than ever before. A lot more paired with the most advanced and comprehensive mobile banking tools. Elevated checking is a must-have financial product packed with lifestyle security and financial benefits. The lifestyle benefits alone include cell phone protection, roadside assistance, telehealth with 24/7 access to licensed health professionals with zero copay, exclusive savings on travel, shopping, and dining. And elevated checking is free when you do any one of the following. You can use your debit or credit card 15 times or more a month, or make a monthly direct deposit of $500 or more and maintain an average daily balance of $1,500. Otherwise, UCCU elevated checking is only $6 a month. You can visit UCCU.com to open an elevated checking account online or stop by any branch to open an account today. UCCU, Love where you bank. Dante coming in to close this one out. Got to talk about some pro Utes getting paid. The 2019 Utah football team is absolutely tremendous. We're seeing a lot of these guys hit free agency. On yesterday's show, talked about Jalen Johnson and the bag he was able to secure for himself with the Chicago Bears. Julian Blackmon is going to be a guy we'll eventually talk about once he gets picked up by teams, coming off another solid season with the Colts. But we do have news that Zach Moss signed with the Cincinnati Bengals. That's right, 2-year, $8 million deal, and he's going to be teaming up with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, potentially T. Higgins, who demanded a trade. So we'll see what happens there. But Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase in particular, I'm really excited about this opportunity Zach has. And Dante, Zach absolutely tore it up in Indianapolis last season too.
He did. He really did, especially when JT was out. You know, he was getting the majority share of the carries, and he made one of my fantasy teams look really good for a solid 4 weeks. He was just a massive pickup for me. So throughout those weeks, he was carrying me, and it was awesome to see that because I've always been a massive advocate of Zach Moss. He's always been a guy I believed in ever since that 2016 USC game when they kept on giving it to him on 4th and 1. And he was like a true freshman. That was so bizarre that they were giving a true freshman the ball that much in that situation, but obviously paid off, and they knew what they had in Zach Moss, who ended up being just an all-around stud at Utah. And his NFL career was a little bit shaky at the beginning, especially in Buffalo, but he really found his footing when he was finally getting a real shot. And Buffalo was always kind of a committee. It was never really him it was always a mix of carries. He wasn't really getting a consistent series. It was just kind of weird. Whereas last season when JT was out, it was much more of a solid game plan, much more of a role that he had in that offense. And he really shined. I think he was top 10 in the NFL in rushing yards for a vast majority of the season. I'm not sure if he finished that high, but I know in week 10 or 11, he was bouncing around that mark. So, I mean, he was playing very good football for a sustained period of time, which was awesome to see. And on the Bengals, I mean, obviously they had Joe Mixon for the last handful of years, and he served them well, but Moss presents younger legs and he's cheaper. So it's going to open up more opportunities for them to sign more players at other positions, which will just make them a better team. And obviously we know what they're getting in Zach Moss. And I don't really think there's going to be much of a drop-off between Mixon and Moss. You know, like I said, Mixon's a little bit older, and youth is the biggest key for NFL running backs at this juncture. If you take a look at the way that GMs operate free agency and the trade deadline and whatnot. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity for Zach Moss. I'm really looking forward to it because that Bengals offense was fun to watch in years past. And like I said, I don't think there's going to be much of a drop-off between him and Mixon. I think he kind of step in right into that role and do well because he can catch the ball at the backfield. He can run the ball at the goal line. He can really do it all from that position. So it'll be fun to see him working with Burrow and Chase for sure.
Yeah, it's like a 2019 college football fantasy team. Even got Orlando Brown blocking for him.
Yeah.
It's just crazy all those pieces put together too. We got to get out of here in a second, but really quick, want to also shout out Leki Foru earning an opportunity with the New York Jets. Awesome for him. Robert Saleh, look, the Jets are something else right now. I'll leave it at that. But it's Robert Saleh does a really good job with his defensive lines. Playing with Quinnen Williams is something I'm really excited to see Leki earn the opportunity. So great for him heading to New York. Underrated player just because he's a defensive tackle. I thought he did some nice things in Arizona. And I think he has a great opportunity in New York with a Jets team that if they can avoid the distractions off the field, they're probably not going to be able to do that. So it's probably not going to happen, but could maybe do some special things next season. We'll see how Leki can contribute to that. But Dante, shifting our focus back to Utah, there's so much going on at the University of Utah right now, particularly with spring ball being back. Where should people head over to if they want more Utah spring ball information?
UteZone will be plugging content all throughout spring ball. I'm going to have some stuff coming up soon. So UteZone's the place to be for all things Utah athletics, basketball coverage, gymnastics coverage, everything you want. But obviously football is king. So that's what y'all will be coming to the site for, and greatly appreciate all the views.
Just like we appreciate you joining us today, Dante. Thank you.
Thank you, JT.
That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you next week, reacting to Utah's place in March Madness. Did they end up making the tournament or not? Where is the women's team going to be heading? So much to discuss on the show, and in spring ball rolls on. We look forward to seeing you then. Have a great weekend, everyone.